Welcome to the Low Carb MD podcast. No one is beyond help. No one is beyond hope.
As we have always said, we're bringing you medical information and cutting-edge science, but none of this is medical advice. Please seek out input from your own doctor. Welcome to the Low Carb MD podcast. Brian is going to be so upset. I know Brian loves you. And he's going to be so upset because we have with us here Dr. Cory Jenks. And Dr. Cory Jenks did his undergraduate at USC. He did his PharmD at USC as well. He is a clinical pharmacist, an author of the book. Oh my God, I'm blanking.
Permission to Care.
Permission to Care. I was
building a healthcare culture that thrives in chaos. I'll help you out there.
Permission to Care. Go check it out. I'm like, I had a brain fart here. You could tell how long of a day it's been. And he's a comedian, and he's a husband and a father and so many more things. So Cory, it's awesome to have you on. You were the MC at Low Carb Denver, and I got to be honest with you, you were fantastic. I think I told you that, but thanks for coming on.
Well, thank you. And I want to clarify a couple things. When Tro says USC, we were talking about the East Coast USC, University of South Carolina. You had the other USC, ironically, the other pharmacist that you've had on here, Jody Nishida, went to this University of Southern California. So I think she might have a little issue with calling it USC. If we say USC again, refer to my alma mater, we might have to pay California a little bit of money. But I appreciate that. And yeah, we had a blast at Low Carb Denver.
Well, I'm just going to have to, California does not need Canada, pretty much Canada. California does not need any more money. So we'll definitely, not call it USC.
You can call me a Gamecock and we'll leave it at that.
Okay.
Yeah. So had a blast at Low Carb Denver, as you said. And one of my favorite moments of Low Carb Denver was, as the MC, I'm bringing people up on stage. I like to talk to every speaker, kind of give them the rundown, the time limits. And the first thing you say to me is, Cory, I'm going to go past my time. And I was like, I appreciate the honesty. Go have fun. So
I feel so bad because Jeff was definitely not happy with my my behavior. So I feel bad, Jeff, if you're listening. I'm sorry. I know I threw you a couple wrenches. So, but it went well. It was a great conference.
Oh, it was a blast, and it was great to meet you in person after hearing you so many times on here, as so many people have, and learning from you and all the other great speakers there. That's the beauty of this community.
So walk me through, just an interesting person in general, comedy, author, PharmD, you're working in a primary care practice right now. So like, how did you get interested in the space? How did you find sort of metabolic health? I mean, clearly you're interested in pharmacy, medicine, healthcare. How did you get to this space?
Well, I became a pharmacist at 16 years old. My chemistry teacher in high school said, "What do you want to do with your life?" And I said, "I want to pitch for the Chicago Cubs." And she said, "You're not going to do that. Have you thought about pharmacy? You're pretty good at chemistry." And I kind of just picked a path at 16, 17. You have this idea at healthcare. I'm going to be a pharmacist. I'm going to help people, right? Help them with drugs. I don't like icky stuff. That's why I married a nurse. She deals with all the gross stuff with our kids, But I was practicing pharmacist since 2011. And at the beginning of 2016, I was listening, ironically, I'm a comedian listening to Adam Carolla. I hear this guy, Vinny Tortorich, on his podcast talking about this no sugar, no grain thing. And my wife and I have always been interested in the non-medicine side of healthcare, how you can take care of yourself with diet and exercise. And this whole idea of doing the opposite of what we've been taught was like, this is weird, but we'd always done little monthly health challenges, whether it was our, vegetarian month, which I call our cheese and peanut butter month, or our no sugar month, which was actually, we felt pretty good. So like so many, you listen to him, you get a lot of really smart people on, you start reading the books, all the people we see at Low Carb Denver, all those speakers, all those books, and you can't unsee what you see. And then you start practicing it yourself. My wife and I were, we didn't have a ton of weight to lose necessarily. I'll say from a mental health side, pharmacists are pretty high strung people. And I've definitely moved from a type A to a little more type B over the years. And I have to probably attribute some diet to that, but we practice it ourselves. And then you start doing it with your patients and seeing, more improvements in diabetes in a short, a few months span that you've had in years. And you're like, well, I can't unsee it. Let's keep rolling with it. So that curiosity has just led me down this path of focusing on the lifestyle side of things and de-prescribing. I'm a pharmacist. So the assumption is the physician refers you to the pharmacist, we're going to get you on drugs. And I tell the patients the first day, I want to get you off as many drugs as possible. And that's a great way to make friends with your patients who are usually tired of taking meds.
I think that's there's something to be said about the role of a pharmacist. I think we take it for granted. A lot of times pharmacists can have a deep connection with their patients. They can catch things sort of the doctors may have missed. They're like error checkers. They're also educators. I didn't realize how much time pharmacists spend sort of talking about side effects and potential issues with medications. But as an industry, historically, pharmacists have been, it's now largely owned by chains, but they would make money by dispensing medications.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like, they were stuck in this position to basically be, advocators of more and more medications. How has that changed?
Well, I previously worked for the VA for the first part of my career, and they, for as much as people want to criticize the VA as a pharmacist working in primary care, they've sort of been one of the forefront of utilizing our cognitive services versus just the product side of things. So taking a step back, when I tell people I'm a pharmacist, they assume I work for one of the big chains, counting by five, sitting in the back, get no lunch breaks, get no bathroom breaks. Generally, the life of a retail pharmacist is very hard. And if you're listening to this, please be kind to your pharmacist. But what we did at the VA and what I've done with my residency training, my career, is that we work under what's called a collaborative practice agreement. So say Dr. Tro's practicing in Doc in the Box med, typical corporate med, and you see a patient with high blood pressure, high blood sugar, you start them on a med, refer them to the pharmacy clinic. We can see them more frequently. We have a authority to write prescriptions and adjust those medicines. Because we have that training in the medicines, we adjust based on their blood sugars, everything that's going on. And so there's reimbursement out there that's admittedly a little hard to get sometimes for those cognitive services. So I agree. I think that's a really astute observation you made, that the conflict with pharmacy is, for years, our money was made with the product. And I'll tell you what, when I started pharmacy school, the money was really good. They were throwing BMWs, signing bonuses, all sorts of things at new grads to get them to come work in their retail chains. During this time, I don't think we really pushed for our cognitive services as much. 2008 happens, money dries up, and we're still fighting to get this reimbursement for the cognitive things that we do. It's growing. I'm part of a clinic that's in the private sector growing this. It's really awesome for pharmacists, but still a lot of times that pushes for, we call it, quote, disease state management, which here at the Low Carb MD podcast, we want disease state reversal, right? So with pharmacy, we're considered successful when we throw drugs at people. We lower the A1C by 0.6%. Everyone claps their hands. Patients go home on 20 meds, but it's an air quote for those listening, success, because the numbers are better. And so I'm fortunate, I found this path where I have this route as a pharmacist to go more in depth with patients, spend a lot more time than you get as a general primary care provider with your 7-minute appointments, to educate on diet, exercise, and then find that right combo of what a patient is willing to do. And this is sort of what I do with my comedy side is you listen to the patient, hear their story, hear their wants. And if they are really strongly desiring to get off meds, I can help provide that path. And for those that are just like, I want meds and eat whatever I want, we have those options too.
How many times have you found that patients are like, I want to eat? Maybe it's just my role as who I am as a person, and sort of my role as maybe in the obesity medicine, and maybe the people finding me, but I have yet to meet somebody who wanted diabetes and eat whatever they want. Like, I've never met somebody who's like, I just can't do it. I haven't met somebody who said, I'm not going to change. Maybe one or two out of 500, 1,000. Right.
Yeah. I think it's
space.
Yeah.
Like maybe you're seeing a different type of person, a different type of clinic. You have different expectations from the clinic you're at. What's like the ratio?
I would say it's 98% of patients want to get off their meds, and the other 2% are family members. Just kidding. I can tell you, I'm pretty safe. Most of my family members don't know how to listen to podcasts, so they won't hear this. But a couple of family members that are just like, I want glipizide and I want cookies. I'm like, all right, cool. You do what you do. But I think within, it's not even the clinic expectations. I think that meeting a patient with where they're at socioeconomically, their health literacy level and what they have going on, working in certain parts of town with certain, I was in a mental health clinic for a number of years. So I'm not saying that it's impossible, and I don't want to insult the intelligence and the ability of people, but at some point there are some people who are just very set in their ways, and they're going to do what they're going to do. But as you say, the majority, when you offer the option, and unfortunately for the patient, they've never been given that option of like, let's do more with diet. And they find it, they get excited, they're energized by it. As you know, there's many barriers and challenges to, from a societal level to getting there socioeconomically, but I would say the majority want to make those lifestyle changes.
How do you infuse comedy into that patient interaction? Do you infuse comedy, or you try not to? I'm just curious,
So it's interesting. I think when I tell people I'm a comedian, they just assume like, oh, it's like Patch Adams. You tell patients jokes all the time. And, what I do is improv comedy. So it's not like stand up, get up, tell punchline joke. It's usually playing with a team, listening, communicating. But improv is all about being in the moment, and responding honestly. And so I use comedy, but with our improvisation has really taught me to live in that moment and read that patient in front of me. Sometimes that patient is in the mood for a joke. Sometimes they are definitely not in the mood for a joke. So a joke would be inappropriate. Using comedy all the time would actually make patients probably more upset. Sometimes they need a hug. They need more empathy and support. So, but as far as comedy, I think that what I find is just acknowledging the absurd realities of what we deal with on a day-to-day basis in healthcare really helps patients connect. And instead of feeling like there's this adversarial, like healthcare system versus patient, I kind of like turn it out of like, I'm provider and patient, and we're turning the argument out towards the man of healthcare, because it's ridiculous what we have to deal with. When a patient comes and says, my drug's $1,000 a month, I don't say, we'll figure it out. I'm like, this is absurd, and I'm sorry. And I apologize on behalf of healthcare, like multiple times a day, because it's so bad. And that in itself is the sad joke.
Yeah. So how did it get so bad? In your opinion, you've seen the VA, now you're in a private company, sort of working in primary care. How do you think it got here? And where do you think it's heading? Especially, a lot of regulations have changed. Insulin now is coming down in price all of a sudden when GLPs are now coming into the game, and medications are now through the roof. The costs of those medications are through the roof. So what's going on here? Help me understand, how do we get here, and what's happening next?
How did we get here specifically, and like how bad our medicines cost, or just, I think unfortunately the healthcare has become quite the business. And so when the goal of a healthcare organization should be to take care of patients. And this is where my book, I talk about, one of my chapters is, it's all about honesty. I wish healthcare organizations would be honest and say, our goal is to make money by taking care of patients, instead of lying and saying, we're here to take care of patients and we don't care about the money, when every decision made is based on a level of necessary for profit. And so obviously at this point, healthcare costs are out of control. The value and return on investment we get for our healthcare dollars is garbage. I think of the amount of not just money we spend, but the amount of time. Like for me, there's a lot of effort spent calling insurance companies, utilizing patient assistance programs. That is just hours of manpower on the phone to get these incremental outcomes. So that's how it's got here. I think that this obviously not the need, but the way it has been structured, where you're making money, trying to make money off the backs of our sickness. And so where I'm hopeful it's going is a world where you get this sort of, I don't know if I'm using the term incorrectly, pardon me, but this managed care model where you get a pool of patients and you get a pool of money and you get to take care of them. And if you don't spend all your money, you get to keep that as profit. So the incentive would not be to make money and do as much stuff as possible, as many procedures, sell as many drugs as possible. The goal would be, the healthier your patients are, the less drugs they need, the less hospital visits, the less doctor's visits. And so you save money in that world of, managing this group of patients. And this could be, from an employer perspective, from an insurance group perspective. That's where my hope is that it's going. But I mean, my crystal ball is super cloudy, so I don't know for sure.
And what about drugs? Because, everybody's talking about insulin costs.
Yes.
Right? And insulin costs. You're a pharmacist. You see this all the time. You probably saw it all the time. I can't afford the insulin. I can't, insulin costs are expensive. And then all of a sudden, insulin costs come down as two blockbuster diabetes medications come out.
Mhm.
So help me understand what's going on with sort of prescription drugs and prescription drug costs. Why does an EpiPen cost like, $5,000, right?
Mhm.
When it used to cost $20. I mean, I know the answer. Why does insulin, whose patents are basically free, why do they cost thousands of dollars? Why is that?
Well, because we can come up with 13 different kinds of long-acting insulin and 14 kinds of rapid-acting insulin that have minute differences. But I'm saying this is my joking. This is hugely sarcastic. Is we've taken these entities that are generally not, they were nearly free, and drug companies have found a way to make them super unique and market them in a way that there's minute differences in the mechanisms, their durations of action, the color pens that they're used to inject, when in reality the ultimate outcomes are marginal at best. And I mean that is how that happened. Those are discussions happen in back rooms and CEO offices that I don't really know. But and working for the VA for a number of years, our formulary was tiny. I got one long-acting insulin, one fast-acting insulin, and it was just fine. And I was hit. I've been in the private sector for 8 months now, and there's all these drugs I had no idea existed. And I'm like, why do they exist? And then you start playing the insurance formulary games, and there's contracts between this company and this drug and that company and that drug. And the best answer I can give you is this shrug of like, I don't have a good answer. It's absurd.
Yeah, so just to give like some people some idea into how drugs become ridiculously expensive. All drug companies, right, what they want to do is extend patents. So what they're going to do is they're going to take the original patent, and maybe they won't, even if they lose patent over the substance, they'll patent a unique delivery mechanism, like the type of pen, the way it injects, it's spring loaded, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And what they'll do is they'll try to, they'll literally do anything to see if they can find a way to keep charging a premium, even if something is off patent. Or what they've done in the past is they buy up, some of these companies will even buy up the competition. They'll merge with competitors, they'll buy up competition, and then take their version sort of off the market. And it's been done again and again. Or they'll make an extended release version of a drug just so they could, they wrap it in some plastic that expands in your stomach so they can, extend those, now they have a patent on that delivery mechanism. And all of this is so they can keep charging a premium and keep charging higher. And all in the while, these pharmaceutical companies, they build in quarter over quarter price increases. So they're building in price increases of about 10% per quarter. So they send out, every 4 months, the price of this drug is going up, the price of the drug is going up. And the consumer doesn't see it. It's the price that the pharmacy has to pay. It's all being passed off, right? It's all being passed off. So it's one big monopoly, and it's pretty darn terrible. And then people complain because type 1 diabetics and really, patients with type 1 diabetes, they can't pay for the insulin anymore. They can't pay for it. And then they lobby Congress. Congress changes a law or threatens to change a law. And then all of a sudden, the price of insulin drops out of nowhere. But lo and behold, all those now there's new medications that maybe help you lose weight. And those, they have another avenue to already in the pipeline to recoup whatever money they lost. And now, you must be seeing scripts for GLPs. GLPs are glucagon-like peptides. They're basically incretin hormones that can help diabetes, have been used for 10, 15 years for diabetes, and are now the craze for weight loss. So what do you think about when you hear that GLPs are, the next holy grail for obesity? What do you think about that?
I don't know. I've seen a lot of I'm getting old enough to see, I've seen a lot of holy grails come and go. And every time we're told this is the best new thing, 5, 10 years later, we find out, well, actually it was killing people. like not to be so blunt and morbid, but I know I've seen a lot of your tweets on the Vioxx issues and the Vandia issues and all these. My thing with medicines, and what I tell every patient, is that there are no free lunches. Every medicine, we have to look deeply at the risks and the benefits. What's the cost? What's the benefit? How long has this med been out? We don't know what being on a GLP-1 for 15 years is going to be, because every day that goes by is the first day that we've had this drug out for this long. And I asked, do you want to give yourself a shot for the rest of your life? And usually the answer is no. So this idea of that they're the holy grail, like, they're really effective. That some of them, it's because you just make patients so daggone nauseous and they can't eat. Like, that's no life for me. Like, I had patients say, like, well, I'm really nauseous, but I'm losing weight. And I'm like, do you want to walk around like nauseous all the time? Like, so there's always a downside. And to think that you can't just read the press release from the drug company. Like, and then, we could go deeper. And, we in my previous institution was academic. So we do journal clubs. And every time you look through what the potential conflicts are, well, who funded the study? Well, the drug company did. Well, we acknowledge it. And then we'll say, well, they funded it, but here's the good results. I'm like, well, are we ever going to see the bad results? Are we ever going to see the bad results that aren't spun a certain way? So, sorry, but
No,
on a diatribe here, but like, I tell patients, like, you can use the GLP-1 to lose weight. And I've seen some of that evidence that we're losing a little bit more lean body mass than we'd like. And so I say, do you want that number on the scale to be better, but do you want to be less healthy? Like, and all this to say, like, there are those patients where it is absolutely appropriate to use one of these meds. When someone who has tried, and I think, if they have 100, 150 pounds to lose, I am not opposed to using these to help lose weight, as long as they are provided the risks, the benefits. And what I tell them is that GLP-1s are so popular that they're not in stock in pharmacies now. I tell them that your lifestyle can never go on back order. It can never need an override from your insurance company. Like, that diet does not need a prior authorization. That GLP-1 likely will. So, yeah.
Yeah, look, I think this is the problem I'm facing. One of the issues I found is, like, this is the right of every patient with obesity to take it, and I remember the same exact message with lap bands 15 years ago.
Yeah.
It was like, this is a right of everybody to take it. Like, it is a tool. Tools have limits. Okay. The
tools can hurt you. I've seen chainsaws and axes.
Yeah, exactly. Tools can hurt. I mean, people have had complications. So, and here's the other thing. We have a good 2-year data, meaning that we know that for weight loss, it works in 2 years, 2-year time span. It's fairly good quality data. And we have cardiovascular outcomes data for it, which is something that other drugs didn't have. And this was the whole reason why the guidance to the industry changed. The FDA guidance to the industry for this field changed after Avandia. After Avandia caused more heart attacks and GlaxoSmithKline hid those results, they required some of these for approval.
But Tro, their A1Cs were lower, though. So let's not forget that their A1Cs were lower.
So it's funny. You're dead, but your A1C looks great. Yeah. So, but the thing is that these medications, they do work for weight loss. And they do seem to work for at least around 6 months to 12 months. Now, we've been using this class for 10 years in diabetes. And we know what happens to those patients who are on this medication after 2 to 5 years. We know what happens. Any effect it has on weight loss went away. It has no effect on appetite anymore. And it doesn't work that great from years 2 and beyond for diabetes. And what we're seeing with the weight loss data right now is, you do get this initial decrease in cravings, sweet cravings, in your hunger goes down, right? Your satiety goes up. But somewhere between around 1 year to 2 years, they go back to about baseline. By 2 years, your hunger is back to where it was. Your cravings for sweets are back to where they were. And so we know, and I have seen those patients in my office already. The people are coming to me on these medications, hey, I failed Ozempic. This is what they're saying. I'm not it's not me. They're coming to me because they failed this. And so my caution to everybody listening is, hey, just be careful. These they can help you, right? But they will not address sort of the cognitive stuff, the behavioral stuff, which is what you specialize in.
Right. Yeah. And that's what I tell patients is that these can be a tool, but it's the environment that you need to fix. And it's easier said than done. And yeah, it's sad too. Well, they're so popular. I get patients that you referred for, weight loss to me that want to lose 15 pounds. I'm like, this is not an appropriate use of this med. Like this 15 pounds that you need to get off for a wedding coming up. This is, I don't feel comfortable. I would not feel comfortable writing for that, but you get this.
What do you have against wedding weight loss?
Well, if it's not, yeah.
Just kidding.
That's what then patients will think of me.
Dr. Jenks, that's obesity bias, I think. Whoever's listening, I got the quotes. Sarcasm going. So if you don't have an East Coast sense of sarcasm.
Yeah. Well, and that's what else, in a world where we don't have unlimited resources, I mentioned these back orders on these drugs. So there's a bit, a moderately large online debate. I like to hate myself sometimes. So I go on Medscape and I'll read articles about these drugs and the back and forth from people on, I can't get these for my diabetes patients because all these jerks are using it for weight loss. And it's like, well, this jerk who's 500 pounds, maybe that's an appropriate use because their life is miserable too. And it's, I don't know. That's a bioethics question that's for another day, but I appreciate, and to me, it's frustrating because the perception is I need this to lose 15 pounds. I need this drug. And I feel like as someone who's trying to provide that lifestyle counseling, if you have that mindset that I need this drug already, it's going to be harder for you to accept some of the other changes you have to make. But to see the light of it, the patients who make the changes, who come back, are like, I feel great. My pain's better. My depression's better. Thank you for, and I'll say this as another little ray of hope. We have students rotate through us. And I've had several students tell me like, you're the first pharmacist I've seen who's like tried to get people off drugs. And this is really cool. And they go in the rabbit hole too. And they read the books and they read the articles and they're still in that, bright-eyed student phase where they're willing to take in different information. Whereas if you've been practicing for 10 years, you just sort of get in that rut and you're unwilling to have that curiosity, which is, a little bit of a dovetail into what I talk about with my book, like improv comedy. We talk about this idea of yes, and we agree to reality. We are curious. We follow that different path. And I think that's a lot of us here in the low carb metabolic space. We're willing to do that. And we listen to our patients. Like you have a patient that comes to you and said, I tried low carb. I lost 50 pounds. My A1C is better. The great provider says, tell me more. Yes, and I want to know how you did this so I can help my other patients versus that's dangerous. You're going to kill yourself. Like, that no default of no of healthcare is what can really turn patients off and make them feel like they're not being seen, heard, or understood.
Yeah, I'll tell you, I've seen it too. The one of the things I now am come to the point where when somebody asks me for a GLP, I walk them through the side effects and I actually tell them, given what we know about lean mass, I don't want to prescribe this unless you and I can make a plan to preserve as much lean mass as possible. Mm-hmm. Because the minute you stop this medication, if you've lost, 10 pounds of muscle, right? Because 40% of your lean mass, 40% of the weight loss is lean mass, mm-hmm. It is going to be harder for you. The medication is making you need it more. So I try to come up with plans if and when we put patients on. And the other problem we've had is the medications are so darn expensive, $1,400 a month. Mm-hmm. It's like, that's just insane.
Well, imagine you're a patient and you say, I really want this, doc. And you go and your insurance doesn't cover it. You spend $1,400 on it. You take one shot and you're yakking your brains out and you can't take another shot. You've just thrown you've burned $1,400. Like that also to me, like imagine that as a patient. Now you're motivated to take this drug that makes you feel crummy. But yeah, I love what you said about the lean mass. So like with my patients, they all leave with a half page of references to Dr. Ben Bakikio's videos and a link to buying some bands on Amazon. Like I tell them, can you give me 45 minutes a week? And they're like, oh, I can fit that in. I'm like, all right, great. Go watch this video, do a little demonstration in the office. Like, I think that the building of muscle is sort of this thing that we've overlooked as well. So that, all my patients get told to start moving a little bit and lifting some, not lifting weights, doing some bands and that very, that minimal effective dose of strength training.
No, I'm a big believer in lifting weights too.
Yeah.
Bands, weights, whatever somebody
Yeah.
loves. I mean, I'm a big believer in it. So, but that's, I think one of the things is, when you put somebody on one of these class of medications,
Mhm.
you know, I think we should be clear to people, hey, look, if you're eating a standard diet and you're eating something, and you're not eating because you're not hungry anymore and you're losing weight, and you're happy about the weight loss, but you're a little nauseous and you're just not eating, or when you do eat, it's protein deficient and you're not really working out, well, that's a huge setup.
Yeah.
You just tank your lean mass, and uh, when we have used it, we have found that we are able to get many patients off.
Mhm.
Right? We use it just as a little bit of a tool. They lose a little bit of weight, they feel better, and
Mhm.
their habits are set in. They made an agreement to work out in the gym and sort of build that lean mass up, and they're committed to it, and then they're able to come off.
Mhm.
We in our employee wellness cohort, we stopped more GLPs than we started.
That's great.
Right? Meaning, like, we decreased the amount of GLPs that we used.
Mhm.
And I think I think that's just an example of we can do better.
Mhm.
We can do a lot better. So, have you faced some criticism from the other docs in your practice about taking people off drugs? And, how do you go about, some of these systems at the VA and elsewhere, they're not really built to manage sort of, going on, coming
Yeah.
off drugs, or have they embraced you? They know who you are, and they're like, here, just help these patients. I can't help them.
I'm very fortunate, Tro. I think when I first started there, the patients would come to me and they wouldn't, with every note I do, the provider has to co-sign it, so they're reviewing everything I'm doing, which I love. I want that oversight. I want them to see what I'm doing. And at first, they were kind of surprised I wasn't going right to the meds, but I went and individually chatted with each of them, kind of talked about my background, talked about the training I've had through SMHP, to know that I'm not just a pharmacist talking out of my rear end. I have that accreditation, baby. But I have found that they've really embraced my approach. And I am so fortunate because I know that's not the case in many places. Because I'll have providers send patients to me that'll literally say in their note to pharmacy for like nutrition advice, and for weight loss or for diabetes. So they really wanted me to hit home on the diet because they get 7 minutes. Like I don't blame them. They can't do it. I get 20 to 40 minutes. So it's still not an hour that I would love, but it's much more, I can go much more deep with patients than the providers can. And I've had a few patients that initially came to me and were upset I didn't get them the drugs, but as I've set expectations with my providers, it's been very smooth sailing. So a lot of our patients I'm in Tucson, Arizona. We have some diet clinics here, and they're exorbitantly expensive and hard to get into. So I joke that I'm like the diet clinic light. I'm the affordable option for patients that can come in and get that advice. So I can't, I can't promise these results are replicated across the country, but I think that a lot of what I've been able to do is expectation setting, providing the evidence, and getting the patients seem to enjoy that approach as well. If I was a jerk and said you have to eat keto or you're a bad person, then I would not be getting such good feedback. But I really try to meet patients where they're at. I work with a diverse group of patients. I'm out here near, in Tucson. So, the different ethnicities, Mexican Americans, especially, I get to practice my Spanish, which is awesome. So I tell patients, like, if I told you never to have a tortilla again, you're never going to come back and see me again. So let's find a happy middle ground. Let's talk about some approaches where we can, whether it's the patient that wants to rip the Band-Aid off and go full low carb, or ones that want to just like incrementally improve, like within each meal, making some better choices. I'm here to meet the patient with where they're at and do my best to get them to where their goals are. And the providers seem to like that.
I'm going to tell you, I have yet to find, widespread embracement of lifestyle change.
Mm-hmm.
And the pockets that do exist, and I talked about this at Denver, you have the American College of Lifestyle Medicine, which is a stated plant-based, organization. And other than that, there's no real entity besides what you just mentioned, which is the SMHP,
Mm-hmm.
that promotes sort of, lifestyle first in medicine. And it's just, it's amazing to see it grow, the SMHP. I'm so happy that you got, that you're part of it and you went to the training, because this is the point. How can we get people learning about it? How can we get people at Low Carb Denver, at Low Carb Boca, at Low Carb, San Diego, at Metabolic Health Summit? How can we get them learning? How can we get them writing on what they're finding? It just warms my heart that you went through it. Has your wife gone through it? Your wife's an NP, right?
My wife is a nurse practitioner. She's not gone through the accreditation yet. You'll make sure it happens. We're expecting our third kid in a month, so probably not in the next 2 months.
Just tell her to she can speed it up.
She'll be home with this kid.
Has 3 kids and a job.
But she's a nurse practitioner that practices low carb and ketogenic medicine. So
this is Jenks. If you're listening, I apologize in advance. That's my New York City sarcasm.
Yeah. No, she's definitely my better half. So when I was at Low Carb Denver, everyone's like, I want to talk to Cassie. I'm like, I don't blame you. She's way more interesting than me. I'll kick my coverage with her. So, and that's, I think that, kind of going to that point, I'm very fortunate. I live in a house, we have 2 kids, a third on the way. We're a united front with how we eat with our kids. And in speaking with patients, it's so hard when you have a patient that has a history of binging and they're losing weight and their husband brings home chocolate and they're like, they're 350 pounds. They were 380 and their husband's afraid they're getting too skinny. And I'm like, this is an impossible task when you're sabotaging the environment. So that's one thing I really like to emphasize with patients, is to try to build a team around them when they're doing these changes.
No, 100%. It takes a village. A lot of times we enroll cooks, nannies, husbands, wives, anybody in the home, because you are your environment. What your friends are eating, you're going to end up eating. What your family's eating, you're going to end up eting. Our culture, our traditions, all of these things are so intimately involved in how we eat, how we get together, how we celebrate. So I'm 100% with you. It's a lot more. You have to get to know your patients if you're going to have an effect on them.
Yeah. What I tell my students is that when I see patients, yes, there are these things that I have to do, check these certain boxes, but at best, when you're doing it best, you are having a conversation with this human being in front of you. You're learning about their family, their traditions, their likes, their dislikes, their history. And in the course of that, you're doing medicine, you're doing pharmacy. But you have, for me, you talk, how do I use my comedy? I was an improviser. I'm talking about what the baseball team did yesterday, what the high schools are doing, what their garden is doing, what their pets are doing. It's about finding what they're interested in, trying to relate some of what I'm talking about to what they care about, so that when they come see me, they're not like, oh, I got to go see the doctor. It's like, oh, I'm going to get to have a conversation with Cory, and he's going to try to help me because he cares about who I am. And I do. I don't just care about what they care about to I want the outcome, but you generally develop that rapport and relationship with patients. And I was at the VA for 11 years. It hurt leaving after having such great relationships with my patients and my coworkers. But I think that's a good sign that you're able to connect with patients. I mean, if you could connect, we all have this knowledge. If you're listening to this, you probably have some good metabolic health, low carb knowledge. But if you can't communicate it in the way that gets people to care about it, it really doesn't matter. So that's what I really try to emphasize is get to know that person, so that when you're telling them these things, they actually will do them because they care about them and you've got them to buy in.
Yeah, I think, most people are looking to just understand their own mental barriers, we have emotional barriers. And, I call it an invisible prison. We call it the Obesity Matrix. It's we often say people are obesity parolees. They're in obesity jail. A lot of times, people just don't understand, why is it? Why did I, why when I was 350 pounds did I eat my kids' leftovers and say we shouldn't waste food? Why did I do that? Right? Why, when I desperately wanted to lose weight, when my wife said, don't eat that pizza, I would say, leave me alone. I know what I'm doing. I'm a grown man. Why did I feel guilty? Why did I feel shame? Why did those things happen? Why would I get angry and agitated if somebody told me to lose weight? These emotional responses that we have, that we identify with them. This is who I am. This is how I was raised like that. We had to finish the plate, right?
Yeah.
When you can finally understand what's anchoring you, right? Then you can sort of break out of that. And if you can't get that from your patient, if you can't, you know, be funny enough, be kind enough, listen enough, you know, you're never going to be able to have them open up about their feelings. And
Yeah.
probably, I know, where else would they have talked about these things? If you're hiding wrappers because you don't want your wife finding it, or if you're ashamed and you're, you know, eating before you go out to a party and you haven't told anybody about it for your whole life, you haven't talked to anybody about it,
Mhm.
it's not like you can just walk into a clinic and here's
Yeah.
Ozempic, all your problems are gone. Right.
Right.
And this
Yeah.
is the problem I have with modern medicine. It's like Ozempic is going to cure obesity. Like, how can an injection cure the fact that I would hide wrappers because I didn't want anybody to see what I was eating? How can it
Yeah.
hide the fact that I felt intense shame and guilt about my relationship to food? It's not going to take those away.
Yeah.
Neither will a lap band, and neither will surgery. You know, to be honest, there's nothing that can fix your emotions, your logic, your mentality, your outcome, other
Yeah.
than you.
Yeah. And and this is my approach. I'll share, like, I was a huskier kid. I was not morbidly obese, but I did have the beginnings of fatty liver before it was cool. I remember I had some GI issue when I was like 10, and they're like, "You have this fat on your liver." I'm like, "That's weird. I'm 10." But so
Like,
yeah.
hey, you're 10 years old. Yeah. Like, oh, okay. Like, did anybody say maybe don't have a Snickers bar? You know, maybe don't eat maybe don't have sugar.
They
Maybe
told me to eat less fat, Tro, of course, right?
oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And like, no fault to my parents. Like, I grew up, like, we'd have a snack after dinner. I'd have a dessert, a midnight snack. And like, I've never had a problem with appetite, but I'll share with my patients, like, this is not how I always looked. Like, and you have, I mean, your proof is just amazing. Like, you can really identify with your patients, but I tell patients, like, I've not met a bag of chips that I've defeated yet. You know, the jar of peanut butter that we keep for our kids is something I literally can't open because I will eat it with a spoon, with all the shame and guilt that you talk about. And when and this is not for every provider maybe, but like, I'll share those moments with them to hopefully make them feel less bad. And I tell them, like, I'm here asking about your diet, not to make you feel shame. And I tell them, there are people out there designing these foods to be as addictive as possible. And you wonder why you can't stop eating them. And they're hitting parts of your brain that you don't even understand. So it is not your fault, but here are some tools to help you get better. And I think patients really appreciate the fact that, like, because in your journey, I'm sure you've had people who were more svelte tell you just to do this thing and you'll be skinny. Why can't you just do this? Why can't you just have 2 bites of cake and stop? Like, my wife and I have a pair of friends. We love them. My friend, he played professional sports, couldn't keep weight on. We were at a party. They eat 2 pieces of cake and 2 bites of cake. And they're like, this is too sweet. And they push it away. And my wife and I are like, why are you not finishing that and all the other cake? Like, we'll eat it for you. Like, we're just wired differently. And so empathizing with people who have that different wiring helps them, feel better and then find those tools that are going to be useful for them. So
Yeah, I think it's identifying. It's like identifying who you are, how you respond to food. What are my emotions like with regards to food? How does my brain logic when it comes to food? What does it feel like when it comes to food? What's my outlook, my resiliency, my mentality, right? And if you can explore those things, most patients, I have yet to find a patient who didn't have, and again, this could be the people coming to me, who didn't have a really sort of serious issue with food that needed to be addressed. If you're a yo-yo diet or if you've struggled, right, you're not the person who's like going to go to a doctor and they're going to tell you, well, just eat less, just eat healthy. Like, if you didn't have a problem with food, that would have worked.
Yes.
Right? You wouldn't be in my office, and very rarely do those people come. You wouldn't be here. So most of the people coming in my door have some issues to work through. And it's awesome to hear that you can, have them open up and have them really just, trust you. And it's so great that you have students that are seeing that happen. I think that's so critical too.
Yeah, it's fun to see that light bulb go off. And like, when you have a patient that's working 2 jobs, that have 3 kids, that are stressed out the max, like, just eat less and move more is terrible advice. You got to identify, like, some triggers for them, try to figure out, like, what could work for you. Like, I have this, I give you the 1.5 pages of diet and exercise suggestions. What of this can you do? What do you think will be difficult for you to do? All right, let's just move towards, like, I tell patients, like, your diet's here. If we can get it to here a little bit better, great. If we can keep moving, like, it's always about making, like, these, for some, again, they can rip the Band-Aid off. Some it's just like making little choices, whether it's one meal a day that they're doing better, or they cut the soda in half, or whatever it is, like getting them some of that momentum to move forward towards their goals. And that's like, does it work every time? No, it doesn't. Like, it's really hard, as you know, Tro. Like, we are fighting an uphill battle, and I feel so bad for patients sometimes, because I'm like, I feel like it's almost an impossible battle when you look at the way food is manufactured, advertised, the drug company, like all of these societal factors are pushing against their progress. And you get, I get 20 minutes every month or two to try to push against this. And it's sad and frustrating for me when I have the patients, I call my magic wand patients. I tell my students, like, if I could just wave the magic wand for them, they're working so hard, but I don't have the magic wand to like give them the results that they deserve based on their effort. But that's unfortunately the reality that we live in. And leaving the VA and seeing, I see younger and younger patients that have type 2 diabetes and obesity. It just makes me sad. Like, people aren't thriving. Like, we're humans. We're meant to thrive and run and be athletic and be there with energy for our families and our friends. And when you see a 22-year-old who's 300 pounds taking 30 units of insulin a day, like, that's not what you should be doing at 20 or 22. Like, I don't know. Pardon my rant. It's just, the observations of.
No, I 100%, sort of agree. I mean, it's, like we've accepted disease.
Yeah.
When we see, the standard reference range for testosterone, for example, for men to be 250 to 900, right? 250 that is not well. If you're like 25 years old, 30 years old, 35 yees old, and your testosterone's 250, that is not well. We just accepted it as well.
Yeah.
So I'm 100% with you. Have you faced any opposition, like, to getting people off medications? Have you, experienced any sort of somebody saying, well, they weren't comfortable with what you did, they didn't like what you did, they didn't like your diet advice? Have you faced any sort of hardship around that?
I've had patients that have said, like, I've already tried diet. I've tried what you're telling me. And,
but like your colleagues, doctors, pharmacists,
less so where I'm at now. And some of my previous places I worked, I've tried to, I've kind of, we joke, the Matrix reference. I've red pilled a few pharmacists that have gone on to the metabolic health train, and it's awesome to see them. Just tremendous results, Tro. It's tremendous results, and they can't go back. Trying to do some presentations, trying to do some grand rounds, some of these other things, presenting at pharmacy organizations. I can tell you that there has been not like rude or mean pushback, but just like non-acceptance of letting us talk about it. Proposals not accepted to discuss it at a grand rounds. Proposals not accepted to discuss it at a large events. And so it's in, the excuses given. I literally was told that it's not okay to give diet advice to patients because it gives them false hope that they could reverse their diabetes. And that made me livid. I'm like, well, I'm without words.
Can I tell you, can we talk about this?
Yeah.
Because I think this is important, right? So the common advice that we hear is no diet works. The only diet that works is the one you can adhere to.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And at what point as a profession do we say, how come we've been so bad at helping our patients adhere?
Yeah.
Right? When does that happen? Help me understand that. How come, imagine we were prescribed, we're going to use the pharmacology route.
Yeah.
It's like, imagine telling somebody who has diarrhea from metformin, right? And flatulence, right? That they just need to adhere better. Right. If that doesn't work for that patient, we think to ourselves, okay, well, can we try an extended release version? Can we,
taking it with food,
dose, space it out, take it with food? Yeah. Like we think of creative ways to sort of help them if we think that this medication is worthwhile. So how come we don't do that with diet? If the diet that you can adhere to is the diet that you should do, how come we have not developed systems to help people adhere?
Ooh, I like that. Develop systems to help them adhere. Yeah, that's very true. I mean, you could, like, this is not the argument that I agree with, but it's easier to tell someone to take metformin with food or change this formulation than to tell them to fix their food environment, right? It's harder, Tro. That's why it's harder. I think we default to the path of least resistance as human beings sometimes. That doesn't make it right, That's a beautiful insight of why don't we make it easier for them to adhere to because when you look at the standard of care, you look at trials of standard of care diet, it fails 97% of the time to help people lose weight, come off meds. And we blame the patient. Like you can't, I think I've heard Jason Fung say this, if 97% of a class gets a question wrong on a test, is it the class's fault or is it the person who wrote the question and taught it? At what point do we have to look in the mirror and say we're failing? And it's a sad reality that I'll admit that early in my career doing standard of care, I was failing my patients. Doing what I do now, I'm still failing them because I still haven't figured out everyone's system to get them there. And it sucks and it pisses me off. But it's a great point. Like the diet that they can hear, like it helped them adhere. Great.
Yeah. So why don't you help them adhere?
Well,
why don't you help them adhere? I love it.
Yeah.
I love
Yeah.
it. I'm going to say that from now on,
Yeah.
Cory, I think we're coming on the hour and I'm going to let you close us off. Where can people find you? Where can they buy your book? How can people see you if they're wherever they are in the country and they want to see you as to help them with their diet?
All right. Well, I am in Tucson, Arizona. If you want to, if you want me to be your pharmacist in Tucson, I'll tell you what, if you go to my website, CoryJenks.com, you can email me and I will direct you on how to become a patient of mine through the organization that I work for you can find on my LinkedIn profile.
Oh my God.
I'm trying to build a clinic here on my side of town. I'm on the northwest side of Tucson. So there's a clinic that I work at part-time, part of this organization that's hurting for patients. So come be my patient. If you'd like my book, Permission to Care, Building a Healthcare Culture That Thrives in Chaos, you can get that little tiny bookstore called Amazon. And again, from my website, you can find it from there. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on Twitter. I'm on Facebook along with my mom. I'm on Instagram. All my handles there. Just go to my website, CoryJenks.com. And it's my parents were cheap. They didn't buy a vowel, so it's Cory, not Corey in Cory. And if you want me to be your pharmacist, Tucson. For now, I'm just here in Tucson. But I also, as an improv comedian, I do a lot of speaking to organizations on how to apply these lessons. We talk a lot about listening, empathy. That's, I think, sorely lacking in healthcare. It's why I wrote the book. It's why I go around speaking to different organizations, doing workshops and talks to different healthcare groups. So if you're a healthcare provider and you think, I want a fun CME, I can do that fun CME for you. If you're like, I need a great MC for a healthcare event, well,
you were awesome.
As well.
Can I just tell you, Cory, you were freaking awesome
thank you.
Low Carb Denver. I thought you were great.
Yeah, well, thank you, Tro. I appreciate coming from you. And then this is not to boost my ego, but I had a lot of very kind, honest advice or feedback from people. And I really appreciate that. It's a joy, as a pharmacist, I don't have that MD license to be a provider. So sometimes I feel a bit limited in what I'm doing. Someday I'll be Jody Nishida, but for now I'm just Cory Jenks. So if contributing to the community means being an MC at a low carb event, that's a joy to me. And it's been a joy to be on here and chat with you. And thanks for giving me a little chance to give a little voice to pharmacy. And if you're listening, I hope you learned a little bit about what pharmacists can do and what some pharmacists are trying to do to get people off their meds. So
I love it, man. Break free, break out of the obesity matrix and break out of the healthcare matrix.
Yeah,
it's just, for sure. It's too much burnout, too much without any effect on patients. We got to do the opposite. If we're going to burn out, we might as well help people.
Exactly. I think that's a very, very astute point, is that we're putting all of these inputs in, burning ourselves out. I tell people it's like if you live if you work at a tire shop in a town called Nailville, like you're patching tires and they're going right back on the nail-ridden roads. It's like, what's the point? So it's maybe a poor example, but you're working your butt off for what? And of course we're here for our patients, but to see patients get sicker and sicker year after year, that burns you out too. And I'll tell you what turns burnout around is when you see someone come in and they're down 25 pounds and they're smiling and they have life back in their face. That keeps you going. That's why I don't mind leaving my kids in the morning and going to work. So,
amen.
Yeah.